So yeah. All right. So we're
No, it's my whole life just changed like overnight. It's quite crazy. I apologize. I'm a little low energy.
you're fine. It's
Uh,
this time actually worked better for me because it's good to kind of uh, schedule my morning around it, and then I can do other things in the afternoon. So I kind of it actually works better for me out here on the East Coast.
I think my internet's better at this time. Like
That's interesting.
in the
I have heard that.
I don't
I
know.
had problems with Verizon FiOS before we switched over to Comcast Business. I would see like where people would complain that like there were certain times of the day, especially in the evening. I guess it was almost like a bottleneck. But I'm like, it's supposed to be fiber optic. What's the point? You know. So I don't
Oh
know.
no, no, everybody. A lot of people turn on Netflix. A lot of gotta.
That's true. That's true. People are turning it on in the evening.
You have fiber?
Yeah,
That's
we
not
actually do.
cool.
We have it. I don't have it now because I had to. We had issues with FiOS and I had to drop them. I'm now with Comcast Business, and it just works. I was actually ghosted by FiOS. We had them for 10 years, and then we had a snowstorm in January, and that caused some issues because they had to replace some equipment out in the back, and then that caused a problem between my house and the main office, and they just threw their hands up in the air eventually in March and like couldn't solve it and like literally stopped returning my phone calls. And I was like, I was actually ghosted by an internet service company. So I was like, I never wanted to go back to Comcast, but they were the only game in town, and I'll admit they picked they picked their game up, and you know, they came and solved my problem, and we cut the cord, and we only watch TV now by Netflix. You know, speaking of that before, and just kind of how it worked. And so, yeah, we do have fiber out here. Actually, we actually got it. Like we bought this house in '07, and they moved in like right at the same time we were buying. We were buying the house. They put fiber around, and apparently they've been going around because I dropped them, and apparently some other people have been dropping them for whatever issues, and so they've been going around repairing the fiber in the area. So yeah, we actually have fiber out here in Virginia. So it was kind of nice, and so I was kind of disappointed that it stopped working after 10 years. So.
So school visits. Okay.
Yeah, school visits. Yeah, that was what was supposed to be on the schedule today. Yeah, I've actually gotten another one, and the idea of actually kind of using school visits to get your name out and get your name out in terms of, you know, both like for your books, but also getting paid for them is something that's kind of like on my 2018, 2019 calendar. You know, wanted to share with you and with other indie writers that schools actually do occasionally have a budget, maybe not a huge one, but they do actually have budgets for people to come and speak at schools. You know, partially because and for us writers, I think for artists, we also kind of tend to get nervous to ask for money. You know, let's just be honest, we're kind of nervous, you know, we always kind of are afraid to ask. And I was just doing some reading and reading about other speakers that, you know, had the gumption to ask for money. So I tried it with one school and I quoted them on price and they said yes, like that. And I went, oh, I didn't charge enough, you know, and because I visited a school last school year, and when we began the negotiations of when I would come, they actually asked, how much do you charge? And that time I went, I'm free. Kind of the idea of getting my name out. And I had done some other school visits and had sold books later or had gotten email, email list additions. But I visited a school. It was a great experience, great kids, great teachers, great principal, but I didn't sell any books. And I didn't add any. And I didn't add any to my email list. And so when the next one came this past year, I was like, well, maybe I should charge because. And I quoted a price, and they said yes, and they said yes automatically. And that was kind of a big learning experience. That one, schools will say yes to it. Two, you know, having been in the trenches with teaching, that if you're coming to speak at a school and you're doing an assembly, you are providing a service and a value to that school and to those teachers. I mean, if you give 45 minutes to an hour for teachers, that, you know, that's 45 minutes to an hour they don't have to plan and they don't have to teach. I mean, just to be blunt, you know, teachers love assemblies as well. So, you know, so to be paid for that is not, or to ask to be, let me rephrase that, to ask to be paid for it is not unreasonable. Now, depending on where you are on the stratus of, you know, your authorship, obviously certain authors can request more than others, but it was just kind of a learning experience recently that even somebody with as teeny tiny of an audience that I have can request money and, you know, not be told no, and not be like, you know, not be laughed out of the conversation when I asked for a little bit of, you know, some financial compensation for coming to speak at a school. And so that was kind of, you know, that was a game changer for me.
No, it's value proposition. It's I think a lot of people approach it, or a lot of indies that I know approach it as competition, where the cheapest, obviously free being the cheapest, wins out. So that's the one that the schools are obviously going to go with. But that's not the perspective that they're running with. The perspective is what is the value? Are you dealing with a professional or not? And a professional demands a fee, while an amateur says, you know, oh no, I'll do it for free.
Right.
And for the past like 6 years, I was the amateur. I was the one going like, oh, I'll fly to Virginia for free.
I wondered about that when we did that school visit together.
It took me a while to pay off the credit card bill for that one. But it was a good experience. I don't regret doing it at all. It's just it just kind of goes to show that people don't want free things, because free still carries a stigma on it. So like we kind of expect as Americans, as capitalists, that if something good should be paid for,
right,
unless it's like entertainment on the internet, and then you just, you know, it's a free for all and just steal it, whatever. There
it is.
No.
Yeah,
I've been pirated so much that I just don't even care anymore. I did I taught a class workshop a couple of weekends ago, and it's amazing how many authors who are just starting out completely freak out about piracy and having their content stolen, and even going so far as like not wanting.
You pause for a second.
Books to the
even. Sorry.
They freak out about piracy or having their work stolen, even going as far as not wanting to give the text of their book to their illustrator.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid that the illustrator will run off and steal it and make it. And I'm like, no. Like an illustrator just wants to get paid to illustrate the book. Like they don't need words. And whenever you've been at this for a while, like your books are probably pirated at this point too.
Oh yeah, I've seen. There's a great video where somebody, you know, just a bot, I assume, they had made a video of my book. Like they just took the cover and some other things, and then a bot took my self-description from Amazon and made a quick YouTube video of it. And I was like, that's kind of cool, you know. I wasn't mad about it. I was like, oh, I've reached another level. You know,
what is that for? Who? Yeah, exactly. Why?
I was like, what are you getting out of this? You know, I'm like, you're not going to get thousands of views to make off the ad, and you know, the book has done okay in the years past, but not recently. Yeah, I don't understand it either. I just kind of thought it was funny. Like I typed in the name of one. It was like my second Kevin book. And there's probably others, but there was a second Kevin book that I noticed on YouTube for whatever reason. He had just made a copy of the cover. You know, it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, you gotta wonder like how many things out there are just practice bots, like just doing tasks that, or you know, Russian Russian spy programs that are communicating through pregnant Elsa Spider-Man videos.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense.
No, there's like Reddit. There's entire subreddits that it's just like code. It'll like every day something will post and it's just a string of numbers, and it looks like the old CB code channels that happened during the Cold War era, where you would just hear like a radio station that would be a voice reading a set of numbers. And it's like, it's modern cryptography. It's crazy, but this is way off the topic of children's books. So
actually not that far, you know, I mean, but the idea of like getting, you know, because I try to explain to people because I've had a couple of people ask me the same thing about like not getting their stuff taken. I'm like, you know, it's going to happen. Don't, you know, you're wasting too much energy fighting it. And in some way, think of piracy as like free, advertising in a way, you know.
Yeah,
you know,
I think that's what we tell ourselves at night to fall asleep. So it comes back. I actually think that this has a root in writers that are just starting out. They have this precious diamond kind of mentality about their work. And I had it too, where it's like, I have come up with something so unique and so original and so precious, and the world is going to love it. And I think that's the first thing that gets smashed into the ground whenever you go public. Because it's like Stephen King novel that just came out, you know, or something, and suddenly you're not original and you're being compared to everything else, and you kind of realize after a while that you're as much like a workhorse as an artist. Like, you're creating something to be consumed, and it is precious, it is unique, but at the same time it's not. It's not precious and unique in this way. Like, it's not sugar glass. It's not like oh, you know, do not look at it wrong or it shall disintegrate. Like, it's and I mean, and it seems like the people who have the worst ideas have the most protectiveness of that. Well,
it's almost like this fantasy that when I've had this experience talking with new writers, it's almost like they have this fantasy that they've created the next Harry Potter, and somebody else is going to take it, and then with that taking billions of dollars with them. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. You know, I'm just going to toss some water on that right now. The other thing, you know, that I've had to teach other people, and from my own experience too, is that, you know, people that are going to pirate you are people that they're not your audience. Because with Amazon and with iTunes and with iBooks and everything else, it's, you know, the purpose behind a Kindle and an iPad is to get content easily. And to pirate something requires a little bit of work. You have to know where to go. You have to know how to download it onto the Kindle. You have to know, or to download it onto your iPad. You know, if I want to buy a book, I just go, I purchase it, and it's straight there. There's no work to it. And so if somebody's going to the effort to pirate your book, that's not your audience anyway. And so I've kind of tried to teach people that as it is.
That leads into another thing, which is using piracy or digital books as a loss leader to sell print books, which is kind of how I've transitioned things recently, because Kindle Unlimited just absolutely murdered my income. Everybody talks about how great it is, but
Nope.
They reduce the amount of payout for a picture book to almost nothing. So the way to compensate for that, because, you know, it has to be in the program or else it doesn't show up in the algorithms, is to actually create a physical printout and try to convert some of those readers into physical sales, because children, unsurprisingly, like the next generation, the generation who were raised on electronic devices, suddenly find print to be novel. So hardcover and softcover sales are up in the children's book world, while digital is down. And so, you know, kind of parlaying that into a new strategy of okay, take the book for free. I don't care how you get it, like, but maybe you want this like limited edition print version where I actually make some money off of it.
And you can sign a paperback too. That's the thing. You can sign a paperback. Having been in the classroom, with the teacher, there is a push toward having iPads and Kindles in the classroom, which is great. But we still need physical books. And you were talking about your profit. I've noticed I've had months where my profit is greater from my paperbacks. I don't necessarily sell more paperbacks, but my profit per book on a paperback is much higher than it is on the Kindle. And so I've had months where I've made more money from my paperbacks, be it through Create Space or going and physically, selling them face to face to at places. I've you're talking about Kindle Unlimited. I'm gradually shifting that Kindle is no longer my major focus. It's just the number. It is nice to get the ranking and all. But I'm noticing that for whatever reason, I even have a book, Baseball and Alien, one of my few picture books, Baseball and Aliens, which at this point is 4 years old, sells more in paper than it does on Kindle. And part of that is that I have Amazon ads running on it. And for whatever reason, people are, because it's aimed at younger kids, they're not buying the Kindle version. They're paying $11 for the paperback version. And I find that interesting. The Kindle version is only $2.99, but the paperback is 11, and I'm selling more of that. Interestingly enough, and so that's been kind of a change in my shift in my plans for it.
Well, in person, I've noticed that hardcover sells better, even with a higher price, $25. A hardcover book will sell to parents easier because they're sturdier.
Right.
And, you have the binding doesn't break as hard and the papers are a little bit thicker. I even was reading this morning, this lady put a diatribe up on a Facebook group about how if you're going to create a book for sensory specific children, like with autism or special needs or something, that it better be a sturdy book because those kids are going to try to rip it apart. And that was interesting.
Valid point.
She's like, she's like, and I will never put an electronic device near them. And I'm like, okay. I was kind of odd, like who are you focusing this rant against?
I think, when those rants happen, there's more to that rant than you. There's something behind that. You just have to realize, and I've not actually done a hardback yet. I need to. It's just, one of the many things on the plate. But it also brings up the idea of, we've talked about, writers need to have the Kindle version out, you need to have a paperback, and you should have a hardback, but you should also be working on audio versions as well. I've only got one audio book out right now. It had been my plan to do more audiobooks this year, but that's going to be pushed to 2019 for various reasons. Because I've started listening to more audiobooks. I've just noticed that driving around the car, that's a good time to catch up on stuff. And it's just it does a couple of things. One, it gives you another revenue stream, of course, as a business person you need. Two, it also creates, for the algorithm, let's just be honest, it helps your work be found in another way. And also, I think maybe for somebody like this person that was talking about with the children with autism, an audiobook might work. Yeah.
It did that fast forward thing where it caught up all at once.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, you're back now.
So I have 3 books up on Audible ACX right now, and ACX is so easy. I'm sorry, Martin. Like you could get more books up this weekend. Right. Like you could have more help one. Although finding the right voice is a little annoying. Or ACX, did we freeze again? No. And I had a lot of people apply with doing the fake kid's voice, oh my gosh, we're gonna read like this. I was just like, no, please don't. But I did. Soaked is currently out in Audible, which hasn't even been really announced yet. That happens next week, and then Poop, of course, is on Audible. Right. Very, very good reading of it. And I did the audiobook version of The Monster Ate My Socks, and you're right. It's it just adds another level of the professionalism, which I think circles back to the original point with the school visits. The problem with indie anymore is just making the appearance of being professional,
Right.
and getting to the point where everything looks like indistinguishable from the traditionals, and at that point you're taken seriously. But the stigma against indie always comes from the terribly written, terribly illustrated, terribly marketed books that are shoved in people's faces, with like incredibly laughable ideas usually behind the concept of the book. So it is like important to keep that in mind, and like I said in the workshop, like have as many things in your bakery as possible. So hardcover, softcover, ebook, read along, YouTube video, like ACX. Maybe not stuffed animals. I've seen a lot of people doing that lately, but that seems to be a good way to lose some money. But so, yeah, wow, that was a complete thought. Now my brain hit a wall. I don't know.
No, I think, but to any other indie readers that listen to that, you know, several years ago, I heard the term professionally publish from a writer named James Altucher. He doesn't do, well, actually he did do one. He was big into self-publishing. And he talked about how like the original self-publishing was just very cheap and it looked cheap. And now he talks about, he did a blog post on it, was one that I would agree with, and it's one that I kind of began with from the very beginning, which is to look professional. And so that when I hand somebody my paperback of even my very first book, you can't tell the difference between Kevin and the Seven Lions and something that you would get from Barnes and Noble. And in fact, I had that experience. I was confirmed on that experience back in October. I was at a writers conference here in Richmond, and we were all sitting around. We were about to listen to David Baldacci, or Balducci, however you pronounce his last name. You know, big, you know, mystery suspense writer, and he lives here in the area. And I ended up sitting next to Amy Poehler's agent. I wish I would remember her name, but but she represents Amy Poehler. And I sat next to the guy that another guy that did a presentation, and he edited American Sniper. I showed them, and I told them what I did. They were being very polite, very professional. So, oh, what do you write? And I told them what I do, and they didn't dismiss me. And I handed them a copy of one of my recent books, and they looked at it and they passed it around. They go, "This looks amazing," and they're like, "This is self-published." Like they couldn't tell. You know, if I hadn't told them that this was self-published, that they wouldn't have known. And I was like, you know, that's the goal. You want to be able to hand somebody a book and not know, unless you know the clues, you know, the hidden clues, that it's, you know, that you're the one that put it out. And the guy that did American Sniper, you know, he passed it around. And Amy Poehler's agent, she doesn't work with children's books, but she told me that, you know, I gave her a copy of one of the books, and she told me she would, you know, pass my name on to, well, her son, and then anybody else. But that became because, you know, I had a physical copy of a book, and they weren't able, the only way that they knew it was self-published is because I told them it was. And that's your goal as an indie person, and it really is, you know, and so that's the goal, you know. Now the sales might not match, but you know, that, you know, you're further along. So yeah.
I mean, even the there's a myth surrounding the sales numbers of traditionally published books. So, and I think that stems from, you get an advancement whenever you sell a traditionally published book, and then but you're paid off against that as the book sells. But most people never make most authors, most books never make their royalty back.
Right.
So it's kind of this, I've had so many confrontational, I say confrontational, but it's like lightly, politely confrontational, but people being like, oh, well, I don't want to go indie like you because, you know, it's an agent's job to sell the book, or that's the marketing department's job to sell the book. And I'm like, no, they're gonna workhorse you. Like, you're not avoiding this no matter what. You're just choosing a different method. and I don't really think that indie is for everybody. I used to be like, yeah, everybody should do it. And now I'm like, no, there's very specific people that they just want to concentrate on one aspect of it and move forward. They're going to have a harder time at certain points, but not everybody can do the writing, the illustrating, the editing, the InDesign layout, the dealing with a Chinese printer, things like that.
And the other thing is that, and I've had to teach other people this when they ask me about my books, it's actually a false choice to say, I don't want to go indie, I want to go traditional. That you don't get that option. Your choice is, when you have a book, you can either indie publish it, or you can submit it to a publisher or submit it to an agent. They get to choose whether or not it's published. You don't. And that's, you know, because again, you know, I became indie because I did shop that first book of mine. I did, you know, I gave myself a year. I don't, you know, I'll probably send it out to 40, 50 different people, agents, publishers, didn't, you know, got the standard rejection. And then a couple of years later, just on a whim, made the book, and the book became profitable. And that was how my career as an indie began. And, you know, so when I hear people say, I want to go traditional, that's really not your choice. Your choice is to query and submit. That's your choice. Or to, you know,
that's a good choice.
You know, you don't get the choice to go traditional. Somebody else chooses that. And that's the mistake. And then from talking with other people that have gone traditional, and you've noticed this too, that simply because you've gone traditional doesn't mean that you're not going to be marketing. I've also had, I did a Skype call with a woman a couple of years ago. She's done both traditional and she's done indie. And she told me, she said, sometimes when agents or publishers are looking at you, they're already looking at whether or not you have a Twitter following. They're looking at whether or not you have an email list. They're already looking whether or not you have a Facebook following. Because the theory is that if you go traditional, they're going to hand you that. And that doesn't seem to be the business model anymore. That traditional is looking at you whether or not you've already built that audience, which then raises the question, what do you need, you know, the traditional people for? But, you know, a lot,
access
you know,
to stores usually.
Yeah, exactly. But again, you know, I'm going to challenge that thinking a little bit. I know an indie writer here in the area, and a couple, not all of this is his stuff, but a couple of his stuff is actually in the Barnes and Nobles, and they're in a couple of the children's stuff. Now he's hustled. You know, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna. It didn't just happen organically. I think he hustled. He went and he met with the agents, or he met with the managers. He had done a signing at Barnes and Noble, and a few years ago when I first met him, and he his name's Stephen K. Smith. That's his professional writing. He does like a series like Hardy Boy type stories with Virginia history involved around them. But he's hustled, and I give him props for what he's done. But you can find a couple of his books in the local Barnes and Noble, and I also know that he's in a couple of other children's books stores in the area. So, and that didn't happen. Obviously, that didn't happen, you know, just organically. It didn't just fall from the sky. He hustled, and so I give, you know, props to him for that, for doing that. So it doesn't happen automatically and it doesn't happen easily, but it can happen because I've seen it happen. It just requires knowing who to go to. So,
no, the hustle seems to be the secret sauce of everything. It's that you have to put X amount of effort into anything in order to get something in return. And I think most people stumble upon that just putting stuff out there, putting effort out there, putting hustle out there. I stumble upon it myself. I actually find myself to be, I never want to make a phone call. You know, like a lot of business people are like, they just spend their entire time on the phone, like, oh, you know, get that to me on Monday. And I'm like, no, let's just publish another book. Like, let's just make another. And I see a lot of the most successful, they really went to places that most people are scared of going, like calling up every single school in a district, or going to every single Barnes and Noble in a school, or paying a couple of $1,000s to go to the librarian conference and mingle with people. And I think those are the Hail Marys that make careers. And
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think about it, you know, in terms of like hustle and reaching out. You and I connected, you know, several years ago when I was just starting out. And what I had done was I started emailing other indie authors I was noticing on the Kindle. And, you know, and so that allowed me, like even with Stephen K. Smith, he and I have not done a, you know, a video like this, but he did do a written interview with me, like you did originally many years ago on my blog. And so that was how we connected. And so I haven't done it as much recently over the last couple of years because my school job just got really, really busy. Got really difficult there for a while. So it kind of cut into my indie time, and my stress level went up. But long story short, those phone calls mattered, and they ended up building business relationships and friendships that, you know, still exist today. And so I have to start thinking I need to get back into that, you know, emailing and calling people I want to connect with. They might say no, or something bigger might actually happen later on down the road. And so that's, you know, going back to the school visits in terms of like, how
responsive were people
for school visits? I've actually recently, you know, for the interviews, like when I was doing that, most people agreed to it.
Yeah,
most people agreed to it. Only one person said no. He kind of felt a little embarrassed. He was like, I'm not that big. I'm a small fish in a big pond. And I'm like, I'm a smaller fish in a big pond. He was doing picture books like you, and I think he might have been in England or whatever. But I just wanted, you know, I give people a choice either do like a video call or just like the simplest one that most, of course, writers will want to do is written interview questions, and like we would tag, you know, we would go back and forth over email. Most people say yes to that because it seems to there's less stress, there's less. You can think about your responses and that sort of thing. And so I made a lot of connections, not a lot, I made a handful of connections that way. And I need to get back into that moving forward. But that was a good way to connect with people. And like I did one with a guy that his like 8-9-year-old son had done a book on, you know, had done a baseball book. And I told him, I said, well, we can do a Google Hangout, or I can send you questions by email about what you did. And he said, well, let's do the emails because my son probably wouldn't want to be, you know, he would get too distracted on a Google Hangout call. And I'm like, I'm a parent. That makes complete sense, you know. And so, but, you know, that ended up, you know, making a connection with that writer. It also ended up making, well, just a blog post that I can use in various places as well. And it also helps, you know, my thinking is that it expands both our audiences. His audience can meet my audience, you know, my audience can interact with his. And so that's kind of the thinking behind, you know, us doing the podcast and doing interviews with other people. So that's kind of, you know, how it began all those years ago. Yeah.
No, it's great. It seems like it seems like the main problem that people have is actually the courage to read, the courage to ask other authors for help, the courage to call up bookstores, the courage to talk to schools, and that seems to be what stops most people at any given point. I know that it's something I struggle against because you do have that sort of like, well, why me? What makes me special? And I think because there's this old Mark Twain quote. I think it's Mark Twain. We're going to say it's Mark Twain today. That talent. I'm sorry. Confidence is the. Damn it! Sorry.
Let's just make a quote up. It's the internet.
Yeah. No. Confidence is the consolation prize.
Oop, you paused.
and I finally said it.
Yeah, exactly. It paused when you said it. That's when it paused. The internet went, nope, I'm not going to share it.
Of course, it's confidence is the consolation prize of the untalented.
Yeah.
So it might have been Oscar Wilde. I don't know, but basically, like the people who believe that they are amazing actually suck, and the people that understand the art and the craft and the creativity aspect of it, they also understand like the greats and how great they actually were. And that removes a lot of the confidence because you know that you're just this insignificant speck, you know, going up against Michelangelo or Plato or any, I don't know, name something. And you realize that this is a smaller contribution to it rather than somebody else's like, I've got the most amazing thing ever. And I think that people are actually more receptive to going like, I've got the greatest thing ever, because we all want to do that. You do have the greatest thing ever. Like it's amazing. And I've also noticed over time that people don't even really pay attention to the contents of something. Like you can create something with a really cool cover and then just be incredibly energetic about it and throw yourself out there and it'll sell like hotcakes.
Right.
And I oftentimes wonder what happens whenever they get that book home, or if we're all just kind of used to this like massive hype.
Right.
The ingredient. How frozen is my band at this point?
Yeah, you froze it. Yeah, you froze there for a second. All right, you're back. I see you. Okay, well, I don't see. I hear you, but I don't see you. Okay, yeah, your picture's back a little bit. But yeah, it's not. I hear you.
Okay. Well,
yeah, now you're back.
Okay, I think that's a good time to call it. Before
somebody has to go to work.
yeah.
I was wondering about like what time does he have to leave? How long does LA traffic take? You know, so
I actually can walk to work.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's part of the reasons I like next time to talk about like kind of the work-life balance and decisions we have to make as artists to continue to make art or because I am currently in a situation where I am a best-selling author that have sold over 1 million books worldwide, and I needed to take a day job.
Yep.
And what kind of, should I feel ashamed with that, or is that just part of the process and part of life? So I think next time let's talk about that. That would be good.
All right, man. All right. Well, we'll be in touch. This was good, and have a good day at work.
Thank you, Martin. Have a great day.
All right, man. I'll touch with you later. Bye.
Bye.